This week in racing, another seat for the Indianapolis 500 has been filled. Speaking of the Indianapolis 500, McLaren Indy has announced a new president. Hint, hint, they're pretty freaking serious about this year's Indy 500. And we're also going to talk about Fox Sports and their recent cuts to their motorsport coverage. The most recent to be hit, believe it or not, NASCAR. This week in racing starts now. So our first story is a pretty surprising one, an announcement for the third Indy 500 car for Rahal Letterman Lanigan, and it's going to be driven by Jordan King. Now, IndyCar fans will be familiar with Jordan King. He drove for Ed Carpenter Racing on the road courses last year, and definitely expressed an interest in running oval tracks. He even tested at Phoenix International. Now he's got his oval opportunity, his opportunity to make his oval debut in the biggest race in the world. Now there's a lot of interesting things here to talk about, and I know I say interesting a lot, but this is interesting because Jordan King, a lot of people thought road racer, exclusively road racer, style of Mike Conway, a guy who was going to come in, cherry pick some of the road course races, do very well, qualify very well in them, but he was never going to be a guy who a lot of people would look at as a full-time driver or certainly a driver in the Indianapolis 500, but that's what we have here. And it's fairly interesting because the third Rahal Letterman Lanigan car was for a long time speculated as a third full-time car. The driver would have been Colin Braun. By the way, those talks haven't stopped. There's been a lot of rumors, particularly spoken about on the Marshall Pruitt podcast that I listened to recently, that have been saying that Colin Braun is still talking to Rahal Letterman Lanigan. So is there a possibility of a fourth Rahal car, possibly a third one full-time for Colin Braun? We'll have to wait and see. But back to the subject of Jordan King. This one's interesting because a lot of people came out immediately and said, well, he's the first bump. A lot of people were, he's going to get bumped. He's going to get bumped. He's going to get bumped. And it's very true that Rahal Letterman Lanigan has struggled in qualifying virtually every year since the DW12 has debuted. They really have never been on pace in qualifying if you think about it. Even in 2012, when they had a race-winning car with Takuma Sato, they qualified, I think, 15th or 16th. Ironically, they were in the same row that the winner, Dario Franchitti, came from. That was a pretty fast row that year. But it's going to be a thing that I think they're going to fix because I believe they have a new engineer that I think they brought over from Andretti. They're going to have some pace. And you got to look at that team as well. Graham Rahal, Takuma Sato. They know what they're doing. Sato for sure. He knows what he's doing. He's won the race before. Almost won it in a Rahal car before. Graham, obviously very fast in race conditions, but does seem to struggle in qualifying. So when we put Jordan King into that equation, what do we get? Well, if you look at Jordan King, he's a fast learner, super fast learner. If we will remember, because it was kind of overshadowed by an incredible performance by Robert Wickens, I believe Jordan King was on the front row at St. Pete, if memory serves me right, starting alongside of Robert Wickens. So the fact that he was able to pull that off, brand new car to him, brand new aero package for the entire field, he figured it out that quickly, definitely shows to me a potential that he's going to be able to adapt to oval racing very well. There's also the test, like I mentioned earlier, that he did with Ed Carpenter Racing at Phoenix. Now, that may have been, at least in Ed Carpenter's mind, a way to get extra oval days to be able to work on their setup for Indianapolis and the races down the line. But it wasn't like Jordan King was not eager to jump behind the wheel on an oval track, and the lack of fear generally is a good thing when you're going to an oval race, because you need to really be able to put your foot down and go, especially at Indianapolis because of the qualifying situation. Again, we really are, since McLaren has been confirmed, we're really talking a serious 40-car entry this year. So you're going to have to be fast, and you're going to have the testicular fortitude to be able to get... I tried to censor myself, but I said testicular, so we'll go with testicular. The testicular fortitude to hold that thing down for... Or I guess in the Pippa Man case, how about intestinal fortitude? There we go. That's what I originally meant to say. You have to have the intestinal fortitude to hold that car flat to the floor or at least as close as you possibly can for 4 laps and hope you make the show. I think Jordan King is going to surprise a lot of people, and I think Rahal is going to surprise a lot of people. I don't think they're going to get caught out twice in a row. I think they're going to be all right. I think they're going to qualify relatively easily this year, but who knows? Again, they don't have Oriol Servia this year, and it doesn't look like Oriol Servia will be at Rahal, and he may not be at Schmidt, which I thought would be his main team that would be looking at him. He may be going to another team. We're about to talk about that team right now. Yes, the avalanche of McLaren Indy news is continuing with a pretty bombshell announcement for those of you who also follow Formula One, as Bob Fernley was named the president of McLaren Indy. Now, you may know Bob Fernley if you follow Formula One. He was the team principal at Force India up until very recently, in fact, up until the point that Racing Point, owned by Lance Stroll's father, purchased the team and ousted Fernley. So this is a pretty major signing, especially when you consider that Formula One has gone out and poached F1 level talent to put in charge of this program. You don't think they're serious? This is a pretty serious program, and it definitely speaks to a lot of what we've been hearing this whole 2 years after as soon as Alonso left Indy in 2017, we've been hearing how much they've been interested in coming back to Indianapolis and going IndyCar racing. And a hire like this doesn't seem like a short-term thing. It seems like, hey, who's the best guy we can get on the market? Doesn't matter where he comes from. It matters if he can put together a team, if we give him the right resources. And Bob Fernley certainly seems like that kind of a guy who can get that done. Just look at Force India's pace in 2017 when they had a decent budget before Vijay Mallya really got in a lot of hot water. They had easily I guess the 4th place car on the grid. If you're looking at the cars, you know, they were behind Red Bull, essentially. They were ahead of Renault. They were ahead of Haas. So, yeah, I mean, this guy's clearly capable, Bob Fernley, of putting together a team. And speaking of putting together a team, we've had a lot of talk about the second driver at McLaren. It was actually confirmed pretty much immediately after I put up my video about Alonso that not only speculative, they are going to do a second car for Indianapolis. So this is a pretty major announcement, and again speaks to the seriousness that McLaren is taking this Indy 500 role, this Indy 500 attempt, and certainly looks very good for an IndyCar program full-time down the line. So who could take that second car? Well, there's a lot of possibilities. A couple of drivers that a lot of people, when I asked on Twitter, kind of went to immediately because we've heard rumors in the past about them possibly doing an IndyCar program. And in fact, one came directly from the horse's mouth, that guy being Tony Stewart. And certainly the possibility of Tony Stewart and Fernando Alonso being a 1-2 punch at Indianapolis is a mouth-watering proposition, especially to a guy like me who does an Indy 500 month on this channel. But realistically looking at it, I don't think Stewart is going to do it. I don't think he would have put that out in the media if he was thinking about seriously doing it, at least this year. Though I have to say, Tony Stewart going onto a team like that would have definitely kind of given me the vibes like the last time Tony Stewart ran an Indy 500, where he was kind of on a super team with Chip Ganassi Racing, where they had 4 cars. They brought Jimmy Vasser back to the team after he left, and also brought in their 2 kart guys, Bruno Junqueira and Nicholas Manassian, as well as bring Tony Stewart over from the NASCAR side. Ironically enough, they didn't win the race, but I mean, that was a fantastic team, and Alonso and Tony Stewart together, that would have been awesome. But we kind of look at also Stoffel Vandoorne. He's got a full Formula E program now. I don't know how much that would affect his availability or potential availability. I think McLaren would have looked at him, or maybe still looking at him, as a full-time driver if they decide to go full-time next year, because, of course, Vandoorne very good on the road courses. He would need to be brought up to speed on the ovals. And again, when we're talking 40 cars here for the Indy 500, you're going to have to be fast, and you're going to have a good feeling for the ovals in taking a chance on a guy's first oval race. I know, ironic what I just said about Jordan King, but Stoffel Vandoorne, it's also going to be his first time sitting in an Indy car were he to do the Indy 500. So I think that would be unlikely. Then you look at the two possibilities that I think are the most likely for this second seat. And you're looking at Oriol Servia, who we talked about earlier in this earlier in this video. Servia always fast at the Indianapolis 500. He was running up front in last year's race on fuel mileage, but remember, he was up there. I mean, he was in contention. He always seems to be able to have a good setup, a good feel, and certainly the fact that he tested the Universal Aero Kit is a major, major coup, and the fact that Juan Pablo Montoya, the other driver who tested the Universal Aero Kit, is pretty much locked in a Penske cage and would be hard-pressed to be able to get out of there, especially if it's Zach Brown knocking on Roger's door and saying, hey, can I borrow Juan for a month or so? That's not going to happen. So Oriol Servia really... And especially because he's a Spaniard, too. Imagine that, the two Spaniards in the race being on the same team, working together. That would be huge news, already bigger news than what we've already got in Spain with Fernando Alonso being the sole driver. Now you bring a guy like Oriol Servia in there. Certainly the fact that they would speak the common tongue as well, you know, both native Spanish speakers and actually from Spain, you would obviously think that there would be some good chemistry between Alonso and Servia, as well as the setup data and the ability to set up a car that Servia clearly has. It would speed Alonso back up to pace from where he was in 2017, where he had 5 teammates where he could bounce ideas off of. He's going to need somebody who's really, really technically savvy. Servia is one of those guys, but the other guy is J.R. Hildebrand. And this is I think this one is very, very likely. Very likely. Because, of course, Hildebrand was spied in the McLaren garage at the Circuit of the Americas, speaking to Fernando Alonso. A lot of people were like, well, you know, they were roommates in 2017. Who knows? But if you look at Hildebrand, he's almost the perfect driver for this kind of a situation. He's good in setups. Remember, he was a rookie with no teammates for most of his early season in 2011. He almost won the Indy 500 that year. Obviously, we know what happened, but regardless, he's a guy who's fast every year. He's a solid top 10 guy, and he really hasn't had race-winning equipment, I think, since 2011. He really hasn't been in that car that could win the race. I think now, if Zach Brown puts the right resources behind him and Alonso, you really could have a potent 1-2 punch there. And certainly, Hildebrand is a very technically minded guy. He had the MIT acceptance, which he turned down to go IndyCar racing. But I mean, he's an adjunct professor, I believe, at a university in California. It may be MIT, so he's probably teaching there now. But he really does have that technical savvy background and ability to explain what's going on in the car and be able to diagnose problems, be able to speak technically. I think that's incredibly important and probably one of the reasons McLaren is looking at him. It also helps, now some people may not like this, but it does help that he's American. I think McLaren is looking at this from the perspective of we want to target the American market. Zach Brown, of course, is an American. So there is something to be said for having an American driver in that car. J.R. Hildebrand ticks a lot more boxes than a lot of people are going to give him credit for. And let's assume that he's able to set that car up with the help of Fernando Alonso, and you have that 1-2 punch in the first 2 rows at the Indianapolis 500. And if they have a good race setup, you have a potential 1-2. Now, there is the question of would J.R. Hildebrand or Oriol Servia or any of these other guys pull over to allow Alonso to get the Triple Crown? That's a question. We could see some F1 tactics play into this as well. And that's another thing that a lot of people have been speculating about is the driver who will be the second at McLaren. Are they willing to be subservient to the ultimate goal, at least for this run, which is to get Alonso the Triple Crown? That will be interesting to see. It's going to be interesting to see all this develop because we're living in exciting times. It's not quite the 60s. There's obviously not as many factors that make this as interesting as it was in the 60s. But the fact that we've got McLaren here and they're taking it this seriously, that's certainly a positive and fun sign. And finally, we're going to be talking about Fox Sports cutting back on its NASCAR coverage. Now, there's a little bit of PR spin in this one from Fox Sports. They've got a new VR studio, which is going to be used for both Race Hub and now also the pre-race show, the technical segments in the actual race broadcast, and as well as the cutaways during the race. That means no more Hollywood Hotel. That means no more staff being sent, or a definite cut in staff being set or sent to each of the races that Fox Sports covers. And this is, again, going to be something that's PR spun, but I'm going to kind of cut through a little bit of that and tell you kind of what's happening. And really what we have here is the writing on the wall, and writing that's been on the wall, I think since, what was it, 2012, when Speed Channel was finally truly dissolved. An acceptance that Fox Sports is no longer interested in motorsports coverage. I really don't think they are. If we look at the recent trends, the amount of motorsports, smaller motorsports, at least compared to NASCAR, that have left in the last few years. Of course, the first casualty was Formula One. They left for NBC, I think, at the end of the 2011 season, maybe 2012. I can't remember exactly what season it was, but they left early on. You also had ALMS leave around that time. They went to ESPN. You had, and then more recently, you've had what used to be Grand Am, which is now the IMSA WeatherTech Series. They've left now for NBC Sports. You also have Supercross, AMA Supercross. They are now leaving Fox Sports. They're moving on to greener pastures. In fact, the only motorsports that really seems to be not getting a raw deal right now from Fox Sports isn't NASCAR, it's the NHRA, which is fairly interesting nonetheless, but I guess good for them. But this is definitely a par for the course move for Fox Sports. It seems like with their current strategy, they're much more interested in Division III college football games than they are in auto racing. And make no mistake, this may be a bit of an investment, or may appear to be a bit of an investment on Fox Sports' part, with Larry Mack running a lot of the coverage from I guess what we're going to call the new Hollywood Hotel, but the non-mobile Hollywood Hotel, because of the fancy computer graphics and all of this. But make no mistake, the fact that they don't have to pay for hotels for all the production crew, they don't have to lug the Hollywood Hotel all over the country, that's a significant cost that they've cut from the NASCAR broadcast. And you think that TV ratings don't matter? They do. This is a par for the course reason why they do. Because once those TV ratings start dropping, even if a TV company has a lot of money invested in a product like NASCAR does right now with Fox Sports and NBC Sports, the corporate suits who made that deal in 2014, 2013 are going to be looking at it now and saying, okay, we paid this much for it, we're getting this much for it, but it doesn't look like it's really we're going to make much more money off of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to find ways to cut costs. And that's what they're doing here. I wouldn't be at all surprised, and this may be a bit of a hot take, and I certainly could be wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised when the next NASCAR TV deal is signed that it's a full 36-race contract with one TV provider or another. And at the current moment, it looks like that provider would be NBC, because they seem to be the ones making more investment moves towards NASCAR, despite the fact that they decided not to buy NASCAR a couple weeks ago. Fox Sports seems to be moving significantly away from auto racing. And again, I really do feel like I think NASCAR is in jeopardy on Fox Sports. I guess the one positive I would look at from this move is the fact that there may not be Chris Myers anymore. Lord have mercy, we got rid of Chris Myers. But outside of that, I just feel like, and it's sad too, it's sad because you look at, especially for a NASCAR fan, I know a lot of kind of general motorsports fans really didn't like the direction Speed went when they went really heavy on the NASCAR and the NASCAR related programming, like the Pinks All Out and the Rick laughing the fast lane. But for a lot of NASCAR fans, I mean, they had that channel on 24/7 watching all of the different shows, and you get to this point and there's virtually nothing left. I know there's Race Hub as well as NASCAR America over on NBC. Lord only knows how long those shows are going to last. I've always kind of found it a bit funny. It's got to be a contractual thing, because I can't imagine why there are two NASCAR shows that run simultaneously on two different channels almost at the exact same hour in the day. But times are changing. Times are really, really changing. And it definitely looks like, if not TV is moving away from motorsports, certainly Fox Sports is moving away from motorsports. And it's crazy. Again, at some point I'm going to have to make the Fox Sports Ruined American Racing video, because I really do think they have done a lot of irreparable damage to the motor racing scene. And it looks like the cancer has finally reached the head, and the head was NASCAR with Fox Sports motorsports coverage, which, again, is a shame. So, motorsports coverage ain't going to be leaving this channel anytime soon, so if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe for more motorsport content, and leave me a comment down in the comments section below. I always love to read your comments, even if you post comments on Reddit, that's fine. That's cool. Yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube, and subscribe for more motorsports content. We'll see you in the next video.